and I do want to give a huge shout out to my friend Nancy, who tagged me on a Facebook page showing me her scarf and how it's coming along. I love seeing that. Hello, beautiful friend. Welcome back to Let's Knit Together. I hope you've been having a great week and that you've gotten further along in your scarf. If you're stopping by for the first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Inger Denny, and I am here to help you begin your journey of knitting. And I call it a journey because it's going to take time for you to build your comfort level and get used to everything, but you just got to start somewhere. And over the course of time, you're going to perfect your skills, be able to become more advanced. And I typically make hats and scarves. I have yet to venture into a sweater, but I am hoping to add that to my repertoire soon. But the things that I make, I donate back to organizations in my area or wherever I learn of a need. But it's really, for me, just a therapeutic craft that I do at the end of the day or on my lunch break or whenever. And as you'll see in my welcome to my channel video, I think I acknowledge the fact that I've sometimes knit while waiting at the traffic light for the light to turn green. But, you know, it might be an addiction, I don't know, but I don't want to go there right now. But anyhow, for those of you who are back with me, I hope things are going well with your scarf. And you might hear that I'm sounding a little under the weather, but guess what? That's not going to stop me from knitting. If anything else, it's making me knit all the more. So I hope that you have your yarn with you. And I mentioned in one of my previous videos what I keep in my knitting bag. And one of the items I keep is a pair of crafting scissors. And mind you, any scissors will work for this, but for the sake of me traveling around with my knitting bag, I like how compact these are. And you'll also see this typically is used, it's for the point of your knitting needle to keep your project from falling off. But because these scissors tend to be sharp, I like to just put them at the end just to protect my bag from getting poked holes through with the sharpness of the end. And the other thing I recommend is having a tapestry needle. And you'll see it's thicker than other needles that you've seen. And this is my favorite one. It has a little bit of a curve to it, but you'll see it whether it's with a straight edge or a curve. So just get whatever you prefer to do. So we're going to use this time to finish off your scarf, which is casting off or binding off. You'll hear that same term used, but it's the same thing of finishing your project. And then because we've added other balls of yarn, you're going to have tail ends that you're going to need to weave in. So we're going to use this time to do that. So after we finish this project, I am going to encourage you to get some more chunky yarn, or if you want to venture into a little thinner yarn as you're getting more comfortable with the process. But we will make another scarf, as I mentioned, but this time instead of doing the knit stitch, I'm going to be teaching you how to do what's called a purl stitch. So we will get to that into the next video, but I just want to prepare you so you can go and get your yarn and be ready for the next time that we meet up. So all right, let's knit together and finish that scarf. Okay, so here is my scarf that's ready to bind off, or like I said, cast off. Either term is used for the same process. But in the last video, I did show you with a gray yarn how to add another ball of yarn, but I just did that for the contrast of colors to show you the process easier. But since I wanted to keep this scarf the same color, I backtracked and switched out the yarn with the pink that I've been working with. So for this type of a project, when you're just creating it on the whim, not following a pattern, it honestly does not matter what side of the work that you are binding off on. However, some patterns will tell you that you're going to want to bind off when you're on the same side as the start of the project. And you'll know if it's the same side of the start of the project when this tail is actually on the right side, because that's where you began the knitting process. So for this, it does not matter, but I will just go ahead and knit one more row to refresh the knitting steps, and then we're going to bind off. The one other item before I get going is, I know I mentioned having your scissors close by, as well as your tapestry needle. One thing I did not mention that I do keep in my knitting bag is a tape measure, because some projects, if you're following a pattern, will give you a gauge on how long or how wide something should be. So it is a good idea to have a tape measure in your knitting bag. And here's another thing, a tool that I had found however many years ago, and this is actually in lieu of having scissors, because say traveling on the plane there was a restriction for a while to have scissors. So this actually, in between right here in each of these grooves, if you put your thread down through that, it cuts the yarn. And you can find this in pretty much any yarn shop or online. All right, so I am going to start the last row, and then we're going to do the bind off process. So figure you've already gotten familiar with the knit stitch, so I'm just gonna go at a regular pace for this. And one thing that we will discuss further in a future episode is more about tension, but right now I just would rather you focus on the steps of how to do a knit stitch than worry about all the other details that will come in time and as you get more comfortable with the process. But you will see as I do my knit stitches, I don't pull too tightly, and I try to keep the same space in between the stitches, and that just helps with tension. But as I said, we'll discuss that more as you get more comfortable with the knitting. All right, so now this is going to be a one and done thing. So this is the cast off time. So you're going to knit the first stitch. Again, don't pull too tightly. And then we're going to knit the second stitch. But that's it. Don't go any further. Now, this is where it is the binding off. You're going to take this stitch and you're going to bring it over this stitch. So like I said, you're going to take this from the in between the loop and you're going to be pulling it over. All right, so before I knit the next one, I'm going to just back up so you can see that again. Obviously, the first knit stitch. Now the second knit stitch. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this needle, go in between that loop, but you're bringing it to the front. You're bringing it to the front, just like that, if my hand's not in the way. And then you're going to be bringing it over, and if you hold this stitch with your finger, but you're bringing this one over and dropping it, and then just slide this one down so it doesn't come off the edge. And that's all it is. I definitely use my pointer finger to help keep the other stitch on the needle. But now you're going to go into the next stitch on the left needle, knit that stitch, and now take this needle and bring it in between the loop, bring it to the front. So bring it here holding this yarn with your finger. If you need to use your thumb, by all means, but you're just bringing that loop and dropping it. So now you can see here, that's what where those stitches went. So just keep doing that all the way down the row. So ready? In, knit like you normally would, and hold on to the needle, and you can prop the needle on your leg, on the table, on your belly, whatever is comfortable for you. But knit that next stitch on the left needle. You only have two. And you know, the way I think about this is these stitches are playing leapfrog. And just jumping over and release. Knit the next one. So here we go. And this is why I say don't go too tight, because you're going to have to get your needle in between this stitch to then carry it over the yarn in front of it. So we're doing a little leapfrog. And that's all it is. And then just dropping it. So knit. Just tighten it up a little bit, snug it up. Then you're going to go in between, right there, if you can see that, in between. And if you want, with your thumb, hold on to that other stitch so it doesn't fall off. Bring that over and drop it. Now you see these? That's what it's doing. All right, we have a few more to go. So you're going to knit like you normally would. Wrap it around. And now you're going to go to this previous stitch, leapfrog it over, and with your thumb or finger, hold the forward stitch down. Forward meaning closest to the tip, so you can bring that back stitch over and drop it. So now do the next one. Go in between that loop, bring it to the edge. With your thumb, hold down that other stitch, bring it over, drop it. And don't be doing this too tight. Oh, don't worry, because this is a chunky yarn, which is why I like teaching with this. If the needle falls out, you're not losing a stitch. It's very easy to pick it back up. So, but just make sure you just don't do these too tight. So let's do that again. Back around. So in between here. And for this, I don't need to really use my finger, but it's good to have your thumb or your pointer as a guide to protect that stitch that's closest to the needle's edge. So here we go. Or you can even with your finger, I'm just showing you different options. You can take your middle finger if you want to brace it. Grab that back stitch and bring it to the front. You're going to find what's the most comfortable for you to do of how to hold the needles. There's no right or wrong way. This is your project and you do what makes sense and most comfortable for you. Drop. So we have a few more to go. In between, leapfrog over and just drop it. See that? Isn't that pretty cool? Only a couple more to go. Take that leapfrog it over. So now we're near the very end. We're down to the last 2 stitches. So you're going to do this the same as what you've been doing before. Make the knit stitch, leapfrog it over. And that's my term. It's not a technical term, but that's just the way I think of it. And I drop it. So now, put down the needle. Now, what you're going to want to do, just be careful with that one. Grab your scissors and give yourself enough of a tail to weave in, because if you do it too short, it's going to be hard to weave in the ends. So I just give myself a little bit of wiggle room. So for me, that's comfortable. So that's pretty comfortable. So what I'm doing, this needle, all you do is I'm just pulling it, and that's it. So now, just kind of tighten that up. And that seriously is all it is. You want just, if you want to add a little extra knot, you can, but it's really not necessary. So take your tapestry needle, and the way I like to feed it through that I found is the easiest, I just bend the yarn like that, because sometimes you try to stick it in that way and it gets to be a hot mess. So just bend the yarn like that and just feed it through. And then that's it. That's all it is. And I'll do it one more time. So I just bend the yarn, feed it through the eye of the needle, and then we're good. So what we're going to do is, see, there's just a little bit of a hook there. So I'm going to take this end and just weave it into this little knob right here. And I'll lay down that little spot. And so all you're doing is, I see these little knobs here and these little spots in here. I just weave the yarn in. There's no necessary right or wrong way to do it, but I just do what's practical for me or comfortable for me. So just going down and tucking these in. Let's kind of stretch it out a little bit just so it's not too tight. So I'm going back down to this little knot and weaving it through. And if you feel comfortable, you can always make a little knot in the yarn just to secure it better, but that's completely up to you of however you want to secure it. So I'm weaving in this one. And if you want, you can go more than one at a time. Again, just kind of stretch it out. If you want, you could just go back to where you stitched it in just to make a little bit of a knot. Just to anchor it in. That's all it is. And your project is secure enough. So, oh, that's getting a little wonky. Because it is a chunkier yarn, you have lots of strands that make up one thick ball, so just careful it doesn't get all frayed. You can just go in here. And I might just do one final knot. And then just take your scissors, just trim that. And it's going to be camouflaged in there. And so what you do is, let's go back and find where else I had the strands from the old and new ball of yarn. You're just going to do the very same thing. So I just kind of knotted these up while I was working on the project, just to keep it from getting tangled in with what I was working on. Of course, now it's so taking my tapestry needle, and I had made a little knot at the end here just to keep the ends from fraying. So again, just weaving in the ends. Stretch it out a little bit. Going through here, through these little end stitches. That's all it is. Super easy. I don't need to go too much further. And just do a little knot there. So just trimming that. That might poke out, but that's all right. And though, so just do that with the other ends. So, because I still have this strand and I have the initial tail to weave in, and that's all it is. It's super easy. At least I hope it looks like it's super easy to do. I like to put this back on my scissors just to keep the point protected, and that's it. As you can see, casting off, binding off, whichever term you prefer, is really that simple. So just take this time to get familiar with that. And before you actually do the cast off, I would encourage you to watch the video a couple times just so you can get familiar with the steps in your head before actually implementing them. But it is really simple, and then just weaving the ends is a simple process. And then your scarf is ready to be enjoyed by yourself, or if you want to give it as a gift. And I do want to give a huge shout out to my friend Nancy, who tagged me on a Facebook page showing me her scarf and how it's coming along. I love seeing that, and I encourage each of you to tag me, either it's on Instagram or on Facebook, showing me how your project is coming, and not just for this one, but any future project. The link to those pages are provided in the description below, and I do want to see that, and let me know if other projects that you're wanting to do in the future. But I am going to give you a heads up, as I mentioned earlier in this video, we're going to do another scarf. And I know you probably are tired of a scarf, but again, the type of project gets you familiar with the steps. The repetition, as you know with anything, is what's going to really feed into your mind and make it more familiar to you and comfortable. But the next scarf is going to be using a different stitch called a purl stitch, P-U-R-L, purl. And in future projects, we're going to start incorporating both of those together. But I want you to get so familiar with the knit stitch, which is what we just did for this one, and then the purl stitch. Now, if you'd like, continue working with a chunky yarn, or maybe venture out and get maybe a thinner yarn and thinner needles if you're getting more comfortable with working with the needles. So I'm so glad that we are here together. Thank you for bearing with me while I'm a little under the weather. I enjoyed this time with you, and I look forward to meeting up with you guys again. Happy knitting. See you next time.